How's it going, guys? I am Folkerman, your local brick built historian, with another episode of Brick Built History. Today we're taking a look at Brickmania's IS-2 Model 1943 Soviet heavy tank. Now, the IS-2 is a very interesting tank design built during the Second World War whenever they realized they needed something bigger. So before we get into that, let's take a look at this kit. So, of course, the very first thing is look at the box. We have the IS-2 Model 1943 Soviet heavy tank. Contains 799 Lego brick arms and brick warrior elements and one custom minifig. They couldn't make it 800 to make it round. Oh well. You have the typical colored 3/4 profile shot here on the front, which shows off the most features that they can. You have the manufacturing plate here on the top. Same information, designer by Dan Siskind, BKM 2293, skill level 3 out of 5, all that same information. 2293, and I have kit number 80. Then you have the monochromatic side view on the back. So very, very interesting. And take a look at the kit itself. So the IS-2 is a very weird tank to look at because there's a lot of features on here that are just different, especially compared to American tanks. But as you can see, the wheels are, you have the road wheels here on the bottom, return wheels here on the top, and the tracks droop from one return wheel to the other, unlike a lot of other tanks where it would be tight, they droop. So that's just Soviet. You have the travel lock in the back, which basically they would turn this turret around and the travel lock would be in there. You have a hatch in the back here that doesn't want to open. Oh well. You have the engine deck with the grill patterns here on the back. You have the extra fuel tanks on the side here. Back to the tracks for a second. So you have the sprocket here in the back, road wheels, which there are 6 of them, 3 return wheels on the top, and the idler is up front. The Soviets really use a lot of rear drive tanks, so it's actually a lot of countries did, but either way. On the turret here, you have the typical Soviet star. You have a rear facing machine gun here. You have the forward coaxial machine gun here, and the 122 millimeter main cannon that elevates and depresses. You have the hatch for the tank commander, which has that really cool Soviet tank hat where it's got like these padding on the top here. You have the Dershka in the back. You have another hatch for the loader / gunner, or I think the tank commander might be the gunner. Either way, you have another machine gun up in the front here with a hatch or the driver's position here, and then you have a random link here, extra track links on the front there, and it really does roll pretty easy. Only thing is the connection between the barrel here and the I don't even know what that's called right now, but this connection is sort of weak, so as you can see, it does droop. It's mostly because it's a very long barrel. But other than that, this is a really, really fun tank really awesome tank to look at whenever you see it. And, you know, it's, I think, my first Soviet tank I got. The other one I have is a BT-7, so eventually I'll do a video on that, and hopefully I can make a BT-7 into a BT-42. But that is for another day. This is the IS-2, and it is a very, very cool tank. The only downsides, that barrel does come off every once in a while, and if you lift it up, set it back down, the suspension will stay like that. But if you give it a quick nudge forward, it does go back to normal most of the time. But they at Brickmania have said if you roll it like that, it'll go back to normal. But it's mostly because of the fact that you have a loose track. I think if you take out like 2 links and make the track tight, you won't have that problem, but it also makes it a little less historically accurate. But with that said, it's a fun kit, really nice kit, and time to go into the history. So the IS-2 is a evolution of the KV series, the KV-1 being the first of the truly heavy tanks that's not a land battleship, as they called it. And it was the KV-1 and the KV-2 that really brought forward the era of the heavy tank. The Germans would face these KVs, and then they were like, oh, we need to make the Tiger. And so they make the Tiger and the Panther. And then the Soviets are like, oh, they have this Tiger tank. We need to make something better. So they started messing around with the IS series. The IS is Joseph Stalin, and I know for the English version, we say Joseph, like Joseph. But over there, it's Joseph, Ioseph. So that's why it's called the IS-2. Some sources do say the JS-2, but it's more commonly known as the IS-2. But it was designed by Joseph Kultin and Nikolai Dulkov in the Soviet Union, and they wanted to make a tank that could not only withstand the rounds fired by the Tiger or the Panther, and also take out a majority of the armor vehicles used by the Germans. So with the IS-1, which was originally called the KV-85, but whenever they were starting to lose favor with Stalin, they changed it to the IS for the Joseph Stalin to basically say like, hey, look, comrade, we named this tank after you. And, you know, Stalin being Stalin, he's like, okay, I'll accept this. The IS-1 is basically the same as the IS-2, slightly different, and it had a 85mm cannon. The IS-2 would introduce the 122mm cannon, and wouldn't actually be called the IS-2 until 1944. But it was originally known as the IS-122 for the 122mm cannon. But the IS-1 and the IS-2 would eventually get their names as the IS-1 and IS-2 whenever IS-2 came around and was called the IS-2. The original 1943 model here used an A-19 122mm gun, but the mass-produced version would use a D-25T 122mm gun. The secondary armaments had 4 machine guns. People make fun of how Americans want to put machine guns on everywhere on a tank. The Soviets also wanted to put machine guns everywhere on a tank. So you had the 12.7mm Dershka machine gun in the back, which is basically the Soviet 50 caliber. It's the M2, the Browning M2, but more Soviet, more Russian. Then it had 3 Degtyarev 7.62 millimeter machine guns. If you don't know, the Dekhtreyev is the version that is mostly used is the DP-28. The one that people most common with had the pan drum on the top, but they also had a tanker version, which they just called the DT, for, I'm guessing, the Dekhtreyev tank version, which they used 3 of those, one in the coax spot here, one in the back of the turret here, and then one for the gunner, which I think was also the radioman. So yeah, people say the Americans love to put guns, but the Soviets, they put a gun on the back of the turret, which is a carryover from their previous designs. Like the KV series, they didn't even have a coax in the front. They just had the they had the machine gun in the back. For its propulsion, it used a 12-cylinder V2 diesel engine. Just the V2 was just its model number, and it created 600 horsepower with a 23 mile per hour top speed, pushing 46 tons. So you had 600 horsepower pushing 46 tons, 23 miles per hour top speed, 150 mile range. And that is not a lot when you think about it. Although I think it had an 840 liter tank. And then, of course, they would have the external fuel cans, as the Soviets do, because they like to cross big fields, because that's what Russia really is. It's only big fields. So you need to carry extra fuel. The IS-2 still used a 2-man turret. Well, it's better than a 1-man turret, but still, a heavy tank like this using a 2-man turret is a little weird. Most other nations used a 3-man turret, so they had a total crew of 5, which you'd have a driver, gunner, the captain, the loader, and the main gunner. So the assistant driver, sometimes known as a radio man, sometimes just the hull gunner. But you'd have a crew of 5 usually. But the IS-2 had a crew of 4, which is very, very weird to think about, because this is a relatively big tank. 46 tons is not small. It's bigger than the Sherman, I think. Looking at the Sherman off to the side, I think it's bigger than the Sherman. Not as like big hull wise as the Tiger, but it's still a pretty big tank just to have 2 people in that really big turret. But eventually they would make a 3-man turret for the later models of heavy tanks, or what would become the main battle tank. But still, a 2-man turret is just weird to think about, especially for a big tank like this. By the end of the war, 3,854 of these would be built. So that's quite a few tanks. I mean, imagine 3,000, almost 4,000 of these things rolling through the fields. And this thing would be used by a lot of countries, including Cuba, China, basically anything under the influence of the Soviet bloc. Because you know how the Soviets are. You are a friend with Soviet Union. We give you our stuff that we don't want anymore. Eventually, the IS series would continue into the IS-7 and I think the IS-8, which is crazy that they just kept on pumping different versions of this with slight modifications all the way into like the 1960s, 1970s, and all that. I think the last place this was used was like the 6-Day War. So this thing has ran its course, and it stayed around for a while. But the Stalin series of tanks doesn't really ring a lot of bells in history whenever you think about it. Most people, whenever you think Soviet tank, you think the T-34. Some may think the KV series. No one thinks about the BTs really at all. But whenever you think of Soviet tanks during World War II, the number one thing you think of, T-34. You don't think about the IS series. You don't think about the BT series. You may think about the KV series. But this is kind of a forgotten tank in the minds of a lot of people. And it's just one of those things that's just kind of sad that it didn't get as much love as it should, because this thing, it would tear through quite a few of the German tanks. Panzer IV has no chance against a 122 high velocity round traveling through that long of a barrel. Other than its slow speed and it won't be able to go over a lot of the bridges, IS-2 is just a really, really good tank. It has 100mm thick armor basically all over the place, including where it's slanted. Like you have the angled piece right here. So that's I think that's 90mm right there at an angle. So, adds a few inches to it. If you don't know angled armor, basically, if you're like this, then whenever you try to shoot straight through it, it adds however much percentage per angle. It's way too much math for me. But the IS series was a really good series of tanks. That almost didn't happen because Stalin probably was about to send these designers to the Gulag, and then they changed the name to Stalin, and he was like, oh, okay, well, cool. Now I have a tank named after me. But, in the end, really good tank, really good kit to have. I love looking at it. I love having, a wide diversity of tanks and planes from other countries. So, it's just fun. But I've been rambling on for too much. If you liked the video, hit a like, comment anything you learned, or if you want me to review something that I have and you just want to see it faster. I don't remember the name of the guy who asked for this, but I know someone was asking for the IS-2, and I do put any requests into the list, even though my list is very long. Well, it's mostly my personal list, and if I think, oh, that would be a good one to have, I'll move it up in the list. But yeah, I basically replied to all the comments because there's only like 5 comments per video, so I reply to anything you ask, anything you want to say, and if you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. And if your friends are interested in this, show this to them. They might either like history or like Lego or like Lego history. So, the more, the merrier. But with that said, I've been Folkerman, and let's continue to build history.